So first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. Very nice
You're
of you.
quite welcome. Glad to be here.
I've never really spoken to a physicist before with your experience, so this is going to be interesting. I need you to break this down for me in very simple terms. Think of it like you're talking to a 16-year-old, because I want the average person out there to understand what you're saying.
Okay, I generally try to speak in a way that everybody gets it. I don't do physics speak on people unless they're physicists.
That's brilliant. Okay, so I know you've been asked many questions, all these questions before, so I will try and mix it up. But I did want to start with the basic one, and that is, how do you describe in the simplest terms, for those people who they don't even think about it, let alone talk about it, what is, in your description, consciousness?
Okay. Consciousness is the fundamental thing in existence. Consciousness exists first, okay, and foremost, and everything else is derived from consciousness. Consciousness is an information system. It is information, and if you think about that, think about right now, what are you conscious of? And you will see that what you're conscious of is information that you receive through your senses. Okay, so what you hear, what you smell, what you feel, what you see, all of that is just data. It's information that comes into your senses.
Yeah.
And for that much, it's digital information. It comes in light quanta, or it comes in little voltage pulses that run down your optic nerve, you see, from your eyeball, whatever. It comes in discrete chunks. And that's what we call digital, when it comes in discrete chunks like that. So consciousness is about information. Consciousness is an information system. And information is the fundamental reality, if you will, for everything else. Everything is based on information. Physicists these days will often tell you that we live in an information-based reality, that everything is information. So consciousness is at the root. It's the fundamental thing. First you have consciousness, and everything else is derived from that.
But this information is just coming from us as human beings as the five senses, even though there's more than that, than what we can actually acknowledge.
No, I just gave that as an example. Yes, you have five senses that makes up what you would call the outside world, but then you also have an inside world, and that doesn't have anything to do with your five senses, although it's often interpreted in terms of your five senses. So what you do, say, in your imagination, which is part of your inside world, generally you interpret that in terms of sight, in terms of sound, in terms of things that are sense-based, because that's the way you've learned to interpret information, in terms of your senses.
So the inside world can also include intuition, inspiration.
Absolutely. And before you and your listeners decide that I must be nuts, because that is so bizarre, you should realize that now a very large number of physicists are coming to the conclusion that indeed this is an information-based reality. That is, that it is a virtual reality, or another way to say that it is a computed reality. And the reason that they're saying that isn't because they think it's a good idea. Most of them really don't like that idea at all. They're saying it because that's what the experiments are telling them. They can't understand reality. They can't understand it in any other way. If they look at their experiments, they say the only way to explain this experiment is as if reality is information-based. So that's why science is coming to this conclusion that our reality is indeed virtual, because things like quantum mechanics and relativity and other modern ideas in physics can't really be explained very well in any other way. So it's becoming a very acceptable idea in mainstream physics now.
What about to those beliefs, people who believe, and religions who say everything that happens in your life is God's will? If it's a virtual reality, what would you say about that?
Well, you see, we have to kind of see it from a bigger picture. Now, from the bigger picture, we have this larger consciousness system. And we, as individuated units of consciousness, are a part of that. And the computer that computes this virtual reality is a part of that. You come out, you realize that a lot of the fundamentals of the great religions are really threads of truth. Those fundamentals, God is love. See, that's a fundamental. The Buddha said all of this physical reality was illusion, was Maya. And that basically is the way you can express a virtual reality. It's the physical part is illusion. So we can go back to the main religions and we can see threads of truth running through a whole lot of belief-based dogma and so on, which is mostly, just a problem. The dogma is those beliefs just get in the way, but there are threads of truth that run through all of those systems.
So the thing that I found really fascinating is when you went to the Monroe Institute and you took part in an experiment of shifting to different realities. And if I'm correct, you started by first using tools such as meditation, and now you say you can do that through just mere intent. When you say you shift through different realities, is that the same as people talking about there are different dimensions on the planet, like 3-dimension, 5th dimension? Is that the same thing?
No, it's not the same thing. When they talk about dimension, typically they're talking about dimensions in space, spatial dimensions. Okay, so you have a 1, 2, a 2-dimensional space is like a flat sheet of paper with no thickness. A 1-dimensional space is just a point. A 3-dimensional space is like the space we live in. You see, there's 3 orthogonal dimensions. And then you can go to 4-dimensional space where there's 4 orthogonal dimensions, and you can do the math to as many orthogonal dimensions as you like. Now, once you understand consciousness then is yet another dimension, if you will, but I'd rather just say it's just another reality frame, a place you can go, a place that your mind can exist, make choices, have experience, just as it can in your imagination and in your dream. Well, you're first aware that you're in a different reality when you're no longer aware of this reality, but yet you're still operational. You're still thinking. You still, are having input data, but it's no input data from this reality. In other words, your 5 senses have stopped. It's not that they've stopped getting data, but you've stopped operating on that data. You're paying no attention whatsoever to the sights and sounds and smells and so on that is in this physical reality, in this, this physical quote unquote virtual reality. Let data go. You're not processing that anymore, but you are getting data from elsewhere. So that's how you know, because this reality is gone. Yet here you are, still active and functioning, and not in this reality anymore. Very much like a dream. How do you know that you're in a dream? How do you know that you're involved in some kind of exercise in your imagination? Well, because you're no longer a part of this world, a part of this what we call our physical universe. You're now in some other information set. You're now experiencing some other information set. Okay, and if that information set is coherent and meaningful, provides choices, you can do things, and you have reactions, then we just call that a different reality frame. And you know that it's different because it's not here.
And how many different reality frames have you been in, experienced?
I've been in dozens and dozens of reality frames. There's all sorts of reality frames that exist in the larger consciousness system. This physical universe is not the only virtual reality that's being run. When we die in this physical reality, we become aware in another virtual reality. We don't become aware in, the one bigger reality. Now I'll see how everything really works. you become aware in another virtual reality, a different virtual reality than this one, but another one that has been constructed just to help you make transitions and get back into games.
But your virtual reality or the game you play must really be influenced by how you've been brought up, your programming, your conditioning, your belief.
Sure, you make choices, you see. You are free will. That's what you are. You're playing this body as an avatar.
Yeah.
Now you make choices, and your choices will help you evolve or de-evolve. It'll help you grow and become more or kind of become less. And those choices are influenced by everything you are, every choice you've made up to that point, by your environment, your interactions with other people, your beliefs, your knowledge, your fear. All of those things will influence the choice you make. So now you make your choice, because that's what free will consciousness does. It makes the choice, and that choice will help you, grow up or grow down, if you like, to evolve or de-evolve.
Yeah. When you first went into different realities, did you find it confusing or did you find it beneficial to you?
Well, the first reality frame, other than this one that I went into, was one that I would just call point consciousness. It's when you let go of the data stream that defines this reality. Okay, so when you let that data stream go that defines this physical reality, then you're left as a point of consciousness just floating in the void. You see nothing, smell nothing, hear nothing. There's just nothing other than you exist. You kind of go back to the Descartes idea, I think, therefore I am. You see?
Yeah.
Or you turn that around and say, I am, therefore I think. Either way, that's you floating in point consciousness, just you in the void. What that means is you turned off processing the data from your senses. So now there is nothing out there other than this black void. So that's the first altered state that I was in, and that is a very lovely state. It's very restful. It's very peaceful. It's just you there, just your awareness, your sense of being aware, and nothing else at all. It's a good place for thinking and contemplating. And after you've been there for a while and you come back, you feel rested, full of energy, kind of, ready to go out and do things. That's the kind of state it is. It gives you a very deep relaxation while you're there. Now, for many, or at least for some Eastern traditions, that's the state called nirvana. That's the end point. That's where you work so that you can get to that state and stay in it for as long as you like. But in my way of looking at it, that's just the beginning. When you get to this point consciousness state, that's just the doorway to everything else. Now, how do you go through a doorway from there? With your intent, because now you're in consciousness space where you just have information comes to you from different data streams. If I connect back to this physical reality data stream, I'm back in physical reality. If I connect to some other data stream from some other virtual reality, then I'm in that virtual reality. So it's sort of like you sitting at your computer, and you can connect to World of Warcraft, or if you want, you can go over and connect to Sims, or if you want, you can go connect to some other virtual reality game, and you can skip from reality to reality just by connecting your computer to a different data stream. Now, in the beginning, it's very difficult because you don't have any idea what other data streams are out there.
Exactly.
How do you connect? It's like you just connected to World of Warcraft. How do you know there's a Sims game playing over, on a different website? You don't know that. So you just explore. You just have to go look around. I guess you'd say surf the web, I guess, if in that metaphor, to see what's there and understand it. What is there? Is what's there what can we say, a consistent reality? If you do the same things, do you get the same response? What are the variables? What can you change? Well, if I do this differently, how does my response change? You see? So you just have to explore. Now, here's where it's helpful to be a scientist, because you just have to do science. You have to ask questions, do things, see what happens, do them a little differently, see what happens, and eventually you begin to plot out the space you're in. It's sort of like a blind person. If you were a blind person and just one day you were dropped down in the middle of Times Square in New York City and you were blind and you weren't going to be able to have anybody come along and help you, what would you do? Well, you take a few steps and listen, feel, see what you could bring in, and then you kind of go back to where you were, and then you go back to that spot and you start making a map. You'd start learning what was what. You'd explore, you see, until eventually, once you'd been living in New York City for a decade, you'd know it. You'd know your neighborhood. You'd know the streets. You'd know the people. You'd know the buildings. You'd know where, how to find a room, how to get back to your apartment. You'd have all of that mastered just because you have trial and error. You just go someplace and see what's there, and then come back and start building your map. That's the way it has to be in these larger consciousness systems. So you just have to figure out what's there. Now you can read books, and books will tell you lots and lots of people have been to these places, and lots of people will describe to you, what they've seen and where they've been and that sort of thing, what their experiences are. But you have to realize that they're getting a data stream and from these other reality data streams. And what they make of that data stream, how they interpret it, has to do with all of their knowledge, all of their fear, all of their experiences, all their upbringing, all the things in their reality. How you interpret the data is personal. So they'll get some data and they'll interpret it in terms of themselves, their own personal experience base. And then that's what they'll write in the book. Oh, I saw this, and this. Well, that's their own personal interpretation, you see. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what's there.
Yeah.
That's what was there to them. If you got that same data stream and you're a different person with different knowledge and different fears and different upbringing, then you would interpret that data differently. So you have to be a little careful about what you read in the book, because it's
everyone's own experience.
Yeah, it's everyone's own experience, and it's going to be different. So you have to you have to realize that the things you read in the book and the things that you yourself experience, don't see those as facts. See those as your own interpretation of that data. So now, instead of living in a certain place, you're living in a place of a lot of uncertainty. It takes a lot more experience, and still it's in terms of your own knowledge and fears and so on. So that's why I tell people you need to be open-minded and you need to be critical. You see, you need to look at things and be skeptical. You have to not just believe, oh, that's what I saw. I went out there and I saw a three-headed monster with long teeth and they did this. Well, it's not that there are three-headed monsters with long teeth out there. That was your interpretation.
The conversation that we're having today isn't the average conversation that the majority of people on the planet would even understand what we're talking about. So there are people who are awakening to this and who are understanding it and who are experiencing what you've experienced. Do you think we'll ever get to a level of consciousness on this planet where there will be no such thing as war? I mean, do you think we're going in that direction? Or because people are talking about different planetary shifts, levels of consciousness. I mean, you've experienced different realities. I've experienced something, and it, like you said, it is a change. It changes you. It evolves you. But do you think everyone on the planet is just on a different level of evolving, and there's a long way to go before the whole planet will be at the same level?
Yeah, that's true. Everybody on the planet is at their own, at their own level of evolving. That's a good way to put it. And they evolve according to their choices. So that's why we started out with this conversation. You make choices. Your consciousness, you get to make choices. And based on the quality of that choice, you grow toward having a greater quality of consciousness, or you de-evolve toward a lesser quality of consciousness based on all of those choices. So everybody's different. Yeah. Everybody's made different choices in different circumstances for different reasons, but we're all here basically working on the same thing. We're all trying to grow up, to become love. And we're just at different places and different parts of that. And do I see that it is ever going to, get substantially better to a point where there is no more? Yes, it will get there. Of course, that's because it's evolution. Evolution just keeps chugging away. One day we will be a very loving, caring species that not only takes care of each other, but of the planet and whatever else is within our sphere.
One of the viewers asked if you could explain, if you knew this, that her name was Sana Lohi from Dubai, and she said, do we get to choose the life we want before we are born here? Do you know that?
Yes, to some extent we do, and some more than others. And what I mean by that if you are a relatively new individuated unit of consciousness in this virtual reality system we call
meaning that you haven't reincarnated many times.
You haven't reincarnated a lot of times,
yeah.
Right? You just need experience, okay? And it doesn't really matter where you go. So for that end of the spectrum, those that are beginning, it doesn't matter. So they generally don't choose. They jump into a life, they experience it, they get out, they jump back in. They just need experience.
And it doesn't matter what parents they choose or what family or
culture. It doesn't really matter what parents, what race, what part of the world. Every situation everywhere has choices for you to make. Now, let's say now you've been around the block a few times and you've evolved a certain amount and you realize that you have a problem with something. You have a problem with anger. Okay? You get real angry. You have a problem with some sort of thing like that. You have a problem with trying to fix other people. You want to go out and everybody, what's right for people and they should change and you want them to be like this. So you're constantly, have this arrogance problem where you know best and other people need to change to do it the way you want because that's right. And that arrogance problem keeps getting you into trouble. That comes from a fear. You see, kind of the fear creates the arrogance, creates the ego, and that's what you're trying to get rid of. So now you may pick an incarnation that will give you an opportunity to work with that particular problem. So now you may pick some situation, okay? And at first you may pick easy situations, and then you may pick more challenging situations just to work on that particular problem. So in that case, yes, you want to pick a particular kind of family situation, location, or whatever that you think will help you do this. And then, as you have more experience yet, you may find that there are some individuals that are just really, you work good together. You work very well together. They bring out the best in you and you bring out the best in them. And you may want to incarnate with them, interacting with those people, because there's a lot of synergy there with that. And now you're not only picking a situation like parents and place, but you're also picking who might be in that environment or who you might run into or who lives next door or whatever. Some significant others that you're going to run into, maybe that's part of a plan as well. So at the bottom end, there's very little planning. At the higher ends, there's more planning. But in general, it's not the situation that matters. It's not what happens to you that's important. It's how do you deal with it? What choices do you make in response to that situation? Yes, well, everybody does have a purpose. Your fundamental purpose, your big purpose, is to grow up. It's to become love. It's to lower your entropy of your consciousness. Remember, your consciousness, you're not the body.
And you're basically saying growing up is basically evolving the consciousness to become love.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. That's what I mean by growing up. So that's everybody's purpose. That's also your dog's purpose and your cat's purpose and the horse and the bumblebee.
I think their consciousness is well higher than us anyway.
they have the same purpose. All the sentient entities here have the purpose of lowering their entropy, growing up, making better choices. So that's the purpose of all consciousness here.
And finally, with with the experiences that you have encountered yourself with different realities, the knowledge that you have as a physicist over so many years, what message would you give to viewers about humanity, about going forward in life, about taking care of each other and the planet? Is there a message that you've come back with, or insights that you've come back with very strongly?
Well, an intellectual message really wouldn't be very much value if I were to tell you, oh, here's the great message from the great beyond. As long as it's at the intellectual level, it doesn't mean much. Everybody goes, okay, that's interesting, and then you forget about it and go on with your life, you see. So what I would tell you is a process, a way that you can evolve the quality of your consciousness better, if that's something that you would like to do.
Absolutely.
So that would be the thing that I would leave you with. And what most of us do is that we go through life trying to manipulate what happens to us. We want to change what happens to us. We want the good things to happen to us. We want to avoid the bad things to happen to us. And we go through our life trying to make that happen. The good things we try to pull up, and good is relative to each person, of course, and the bad things we try to make not happen. So that's our focus. We focus on, how can I manipulate things? How can I manipulate my children so that they turn out to be good, healthy, happy, productive people, and not drug addicts, sleeping under the bridge? How can I, what can I tell them or say to them or do to them that will manipulate them? By manipulate, I don't mean something negative. I mean that will, affect them in a way that, that they're the way I want them to be. And I do the same thing with my wife or my husband or my boss. I want my boss to think that I'm a really great employee and that they want to give me a raise. And I want, my spouse to feel this way. And so we're all going through life trying to arrange it so it suits us from our own vision. Okay. So that's really not helpful at all. Now you have to be a little aware of what's going on. You have a mortgage to pay, you have rent to pay, and you have to think ahead about, how am I going to do that? But in general, it's much more important how you deal with things than actually the things you have to deal with. You see what I mean? It's not so much that things need to work out the way you want them to work out. They can work out however it is they do. What's really important is, how do you deal with them? Yeah. It's not what happens, it's how do you deal with what happens. So instead of putting all of our focus on trying to manage what happens, we should take that focus and put it on trying to manage how we deal with what happens. You don't have to manipulate your kids to be good kids, or your boss to appreciate your work, or your spouse to, appreciate what you do and that sort of thing. They will. If you just care about them instead of yourself, they will all appreciate you a whole lot.
We're all just going to take care of each other then. Simple as that.
Simple as that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I hope people out there will contact you if they, interested in talking to you too, and have any questions for you. And it's been so interesting talking to you, and I hope to talk to you again soon in the future.
Okay.
Okay, and I hope you're in this reality while we were talking today. You weren't in another one.
A little some of both. Eventually you learn to live in a bigger reality. You don't just live in this reality. In the beginning, it's you're either in this reality, or you're in another reality.
Yeah.
You're not in point consciousness if you're here. If you're here, you're here, and if you're there, you're there. But eventually you live in a bigger reality. You're there and here, and other realities. And you may live in several realities full time, to where you're interacting and functioning in all of them all the time.
And you're able to do that.
And you get to be able to do that with practice. So you live, I'm not always here. I'm sometimes there and doing other things, but you can do multiple things. I can have a conversation with you and be doing something else in some other place at some other time. So it just, you get to live in bigger realities all at once. The more you evolve the quality of your consciousness, the bigger your reality becomes. When you're very, very fearful, your reality is very small. As you grow and become love, that reality gets bigger and bigger, and eventually it gets bigger than just this universe. It gets bigger than just this virtual reality.